Let's bring in our panelists now with their take on these stories and more. Retired gunnery sergeant for the U.S. Marine Corps, Newsmax analyst Jessie Jane Duff. Also with us, host of the 13-minute news hour, Bobby Eberle, alongside former Navy SEAL, author of the book Sheep No More, Jonathan Gilliam. Panelists, thanks for coming on today. Jessie Jane, let me start with you. Again, these are American citizens who are impacted by this drug crisis, as we heard from the AG here. What is this administration really doing to combat this crisis?
We've seen absolutely nothing from the Biden White House on being aggressively stopping the drug infiltration at the border. And as the AG had indicated, that this is increasing the addiction. So what happens over time, you have a bigger market of people that are dependent upon these drugs. Not only that, we're talking about human trafficking, women and children that are being sexually exploited. You have people that are being used as human labor, that not necessarily being paid appropriate wages because they're being abused. The abuse of the illegals is rampant, and the Biden administration seems to want to call this all humanitarian. We can't deny them the opportunity to come to the United States, but yet they are being used as pawns to be exploited by drug cartels and human traffickers all across this nation. It's a tragedy within our own borders, and our White House is tolerating and enabling it.
Yeah. Bobby, we were just speaking with Mike Carter, who did a report on New York City toddlers who have to wear face masks. At the same time, Title 42, a pandemic era law, is going to be lifted at the end of the month here, the next month at least. What do we make of where this administration stands when it comes to really combating these important issues?
Well, right. Well, what it shows is that politics rules. I mean, and the left is in charge of D.C. right now, of Washington. And they're going to push mandates, they're going to push lockdowns, they're going to push an open border, regardless of if any situation violates the science. I mean, there is no evidence whatsoever that young children, they're not susceptible to the virus. Hardly any have gotten seriously sick or died in the entire country, and yet they're being masked up purely for control, purely for politics. And at the border, it's a lack of control. They want to flood this in. They think that this flood of illegals is going to lead to more Democrat voters. In the meantime, they're helping spread COVID with their policies. None of it makes sense. Jonathan,
if you were at the border right now serving as a Border Patrol agent and you were anticipating a surge of migrants to come, what would you do to sort of prepare for that? Would you be able to?
Well, I'll tell you, I would use the Democrat playbook, except I'd reverse it. I'd be reaching out to my congressmen and congresswomen and getting them and the Republican Party to start shipping Americans that want to come to the border down to the border to stand there and help and assist the Border Patrol to keep people from crossing over. The Democratic Party, as we clearly know, is involved in the process of knowingly bringing these people up to the border so that they can cross. Why aren't we doing the same with American citizens that go down there? This is something that the Border Patrol alone cannot handle. It's time for the American citizens to step forward and for people to stop looking out or start looking outside the box to solve these problems.
An anticipated 18,000 migrants could cross daily after Title 42 is lifted. That is an unbelievable surge. Panelists, stay with us. A lot more to cover right here on National Report. And as the war in Ukraine continued on this week, there were some other notable things a little closer to home. It included this: Black Lives Matter organization reportedly using donation money to buy a $6 million home in LA. Also this: New York City school kids still forced to wear masks for those under age 5. As well as President Biden getting overshadowed by President Obama's visit to the White House. Just a number of headlines we were following for you. Let's bring back in our panelists now to discuss. Jessie Jane, Bobby, and Jonathan. Jessie Jane, let's start with this: the BLM home, the scandalous one. Black Lives Matter using $6 million to purchase a Southern California home. The New York Post with this report. And then also a follow-up here. It was sold for more than 250% than the price of similar homes in the area. The New York Post taking a closer look at that. What do you make of this particular headline from this week?
Well, shocking, right? I am saying that with absolute sarcasm. It seems like the greatest grift that ever existed. Many people, including I have a neighbor that has a BLM sign in their front yard, were pulled into this to ensure that civil rights were respected and people were respected, when in all reality, this is a Marxist run organization. When you look at their very own website, they have Marxist ideology and they wanted to break down the nuclear family of the United States. They did nothing to benefit the communities that need to be served the most. And we can see that by the exploitation of the money that they had essentially grifted off of major corporations that donated frivolously, not doing their homework or research. And think about how much that money could have done. Many, many charities, such as your Salvation Army, your Red Cross, numerous organizations that benefit veterans. But instead, they divided and separated most of the people in this country with a political agenda that they essentially profited off of.
It's so interesting to always follow the money. We're going to keep an eye on that report. Bobby, I'll go to you. Some other news this week. Kids in New York City under age 5 still having to wear face masks. Tell me about this decision from the New York City mayor.
Well, it's based on politics and not science. From the very beginning, we knew the rates of infection and serious illness from any age group up and down the spectrum. The ones that were the least likely to get sick, the ones that were the least likely to die or even transmit the virus, young children. We knew that from the beginning. And yet these are the ones that are being masked up. And it borders on, it doesn't even border on, it meets the threshold, in my opinion, for child abuse. Because when you look at the emotional damage, the emotional learning that kids need to have with face-to-face interaction, human interaction, touching, sitting, learning, none of that happened over the last 2 years, and now they want to keep them masked up. It makes no sense at all, and these people should actually be held accountable. These parents should form some kind of class action suit and take it to these officials and make this stop now.
We've heard some parents are speaking out against it.
Yes.
Jonathan, we've also, of course, seen this headline. It's more of a video than a headline. This was President Biden at an event earlier this week when former President Barack Obama actually made his return to the White House for an Obamacare event. We can cue up the video. But Jonathan, what stood out to you from President Obama's return back to the White House, and then what happened after the speeches were made?
Well, listen, this is a perfect ending to this panel discussion, because we talked about Black Lives Matter, which is the activist arm, along with Antifa, of the left. And then you're talking about these ridiculous mandates, like making the people who are the least susceptible to any type of COVID to wear masks, these young people. And then you see this incompetent, I hate to use the word, but buffoon, walking around on stage looking as lost as he really is. And so what you see when you put all these together, as a good investigator would look at the totality of the circumstances, is that the left is destroying this nation, and it's being led by incompetency. And they do that for their own benefit. And as we see, like for instance, in this picture, where Nancy Pelosi now has COVID as a result of hanging out with people who have COVID, a mask wouldn't have done any good in that circumstance. The reality is these people live by a separate set of rules. They impose things on people that they won't follow, and they do it because they run this nation like kings and queens that are incompetent, and they treat the rest of the people like servants and slaves.
Well, that was our week in review, at least a look at it from some of those top headlines. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today, Jessie Jane Dove, Bobby Eberle, Jonathan Gillum. Thank you so much, panel. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right, friends, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button above. Once you do, tell your friends, share it, spread the word about the 13-minute news hour so we can keep growing. And for more great content, check out these videos right here, and I'll see you next time.